Let's draft our back bodice. These are all the supplies you're going to need to draft our back bodice. We are referencing page 42 and 43 of our textbook. You'll need a piece of paper about 18 by 28-ish, L square ruler. Do we actually need that? No, actually I don't think. Wait, yeah, pipstick, clear gridded ruler, French curve, and pencil and eraser. I will be using a Sharpie so that you can see it on the camera. Let's do this. So same situation as our front bodice drafting. You'll notice that there are measurements here. The number in parentheses, you can refer back to the measurement chart for that number under size 10. Add any ease it tells you to, and then input the final measurement on the blank. Do that on page 42 and 43, and we'll be ready to draft. So if you remember from drafting the front bodice, our center front line was closest to us on our paper. And that's because we're always defaulting to drafting the right side, the wearer's right side, okay? Meaning when we did the front, this is the wearer's right side, so center front is closest to us, side seam would be furthest away. We always want the top of the pattern piece to our right and the bottom of the pattern piece to our left. Can you do it the other way around? Yeah, but I find that it helps in pattern making especially to sort of standardize, be consistent about things. So that's the way we're gonna do it. So you'll notice that the wearer's right side on the back bodice, the center back is going to be furthest away from us. That is the first line we are going to draft. The center back, and it's going to be the full length measurement. So that will be A to B. A to B is going to be 17.5. So a couple inches from the far side of your paper, I want you to just draw a nice long line using your L square ruler. On the right side, you're going to give yourself a little tick mark and label it A. Then you're going to measure 17.5 inches to the left and label it B. Up here at A and at B, we're going to square some lines out, okay? Really get this edge of your L square ruler in line with your center back line. And then square your line out. C, we're going to square out and give ourselves a mark at 8 inches. And yes, that is C. Now, so down here at B, we're going to square a line out as well, and we are going to put a mark at 9 3/8, and that is going to be E. Now up here on our A to B line, I want you to start at B, zero your ruler out at B, and measure towards A, 16 3/4. This is a good job for my clear gridded ruler. So again, zero out at B, 16 3/4 towards A, and label that D. These should be really close to one another, about 3/4 of an inch. Yep. We're also going to square a line out at D. It really only needs to be about 4 inches or so. And again, anytime in this drafting that you see my big beautiful head come into the camera, I want that to trigger you to like get your head up on top of your ruler so you really are seeing the accurate measurements, okay? Over here at E, I want you to square line up. maybe about 12 inches or so. Now, we have gotten the framework finished for our back draft, okay? On page 42, this is figure 6. I want you to really start reflecting on the illustrations in our book and the instructions. Not only utilize the videos and what I'm telling you, I want you to be able to figure it out yourself, okay? So this is the framework for a back bodice. I am going to run around and label this A to B line center back. Like always, over here on the right side is our shoulder area. Over here on the left is our waist. And then over here, this is going to be our side seam. This is just to help you orient yourself, but we have finalized the framework. Let's move on. Next up, we are going to start developing the neck and shoulder area, and then we're going to move down to getting the waist start in place. So our next step is going to be, we're going to take our back neck width and add a little bit of ease. So this is measuring from center back over to like your high shoulder point kind of. That measurement is going to be 3 1/8. So on this A to C line from A towards C, we're going to measure 3 1/8, give ourselves a mark, and label it F. Next step I need us to do is right here at C, I want to square a line down just about 3 or 4 inches. Next, we're going to be measuring our shoulder slope, which is kind of going from center back at the waist, diagonally on the body up towards the shoulder tip, okay? So that measurement is going to be 17 1/8. We're going to start our ruler here at B. So zero your ruler out at B, and you are going to create, the zero is going to create a pivot point. So you can do that with your finger. And then you are just going to pivot this side of your ruler until 17 1/8 hits somewhere along this line squared down from C, okay? Again, zero out at B, pivot, pivot, pivot until 17 1/8 hits that guideline. Give yourself a diagonal line, and we are going to label this G. Now we're going to develop our shoulder line, okay? So from F, I want you to get your ruler going through F, and then also allow your ruler to pass right through G, and we are going to kind of draw a line. I want it to go past G a little bit. Now you're going to start your measurement here and measure along this line 5 3/4. 5 3/4 should pass G a little bit. So give yourself a tick mark. I'm 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch past G, and I'm going to cross out G and label this tick mark H. And since you're using a pencil, if any of this gets super messy for you, you can erase any kind of this guideline possibly. That might help make it so you know exactly where H is. Now I want you to go back here to your high shoulder point. F is going to be our high shoulder point. And that is just where your neckline meets your shoulder line. H over here is kind of like our shoulder tip, okay? So at F, what I want you to do is we want to create a line that's squared down from F towards this D line. And we want it to be a 90-degree angle with our shoulder line. So line up one of those small lines on your ruler with your shoulder line, and then square a line down to D, to the D guideline. Kind of like that. So we want this to be a 90-degree angle. Now we're going to come down here at the waist and develop sort of our dart, our waist dart, and our dart placement. So B to I, that's going to be our dart placement line. And if you remember on our front bodice, we wanted the waist dart to be 3 1/4 inches from center front. We want the same thing. We want our waist dart to be 3 1/4 inches from center back. So B, measure 3 1/4 inches over and label it I. Now we are going to measure our waist, our complete waistline, okay? So we're gonna measure our waist arc, we're gonna add our dart intake, and we're gonna add a little bit of ease. So from B over to J, I want you to measure 8 3/8 inches along this line. So now come back here to I. This is our first dart leg. We want to measure 1.5 inches over to our other dart leg, which is K. So now this is going to be our dart intake between here, 1.5 inches. We want to find the center of that and label it L. So 1.5 inches, the center of that should be 3/4. So put the 3/4 line on your ruler on one of your dart legs and measure over towards the center. And then make sure that those are equal. And label that L. Now we're getting ready to work on developing the side seam and finalizing this waist dart. Over here at J, I want you to square a line down at J 3/16 of an inch. Where the heck am I looking? Oh yeah. Over here at J, I want you to square a line down 3/16 of an inch. That is super, super tiny. It is 3 of these little tiny tick marks along the edge of your clear gridded ruler. So square a line down 3/16 of an inch and then label it M. So now for our side seam. From M, we want to measure up 8 3/8. We definitely want our side seam to be 8 3/8 so that it matches the side seam on our front bodice. What I want you to do is zero your ruler out here at M, create a pivot point right there at 0, and pivot your ruler over until 8 3/8 hits somewhere along this line that is squared up from E. Label this N and connect the two. If I were you, because you're using a pencil, I would go and erase these lines. We're no longer using these, those were just our framework. This is now our new side seam. Now back to our waist dart. At L, I want you to square a line up, and our book tells us to square up 1 inch less than our side seam. So our side seam was 8 3/8, so we're gonna square up 7 3/8 and label that O. It's not quite going to hit at this diagonal, or it shouldn't. And some of you might be looking at the illustration in the book and being like, whoa, it looks like O comes above this diagonal line. That's because the illustrations were developed, I believe, from like a size 6 or something. And so that may happen depending on the size you're making or the measurements. But for size 10, this O should not quite hit the diagonal line you have. So O here is going to be our waist dart point. What I want you to do is draw a line from O through I and just go 1/8 of an inch past I. You are going to do the same thing over here at K for the other dart leg. So, like I said, get your ruler up here at O, pivot it so that it goes through I, and we want to go 1/8 of an inch past I. I'm gonna give myself a little tick mark, draw my line, okay? Using the power of my pencil lead, and I'm just gonna pivot over. I'm gonna pivot over so my ruler goes through K. Draw a line from O through K and go 1/8 of an inch past K. Make sure you have hash marks to show. This is where you're gonna want your hip stick. You are going to draw curved, slightly upwardly curved lines from B to I and then from K to M. And what I mean is that the curve kind of goes upward. It does not droop down, kind of curves up. I like to use my hip stick. Now here at B, I definitely want there to be a bit of a right angle right here at B. And I also want there to be a bit of a right angle right here at M. So I'm gonna use my clear gridded ruler just to get a 90-degree angle started. You really only need like a 1/2 inch or so of like a 90-degree angle going here. And then you can bring in your L-square ruler. I like to use the flat side towards the side that I need my 90-degree angle on. And I'm gonna put my pencil lead there, and I just kind of slide it over until the curve kind of comes down and matches the end of my dart leg. Then I draw it in there. I'm gonna flip over, because again, I like to have the straighter end of my ruler near where I need a 90-degree angle. I'm gonna do the same thing, get my pencil there, and just kind of slide my ruler until the curve seems to match well up to my dart leg. Okay? If I were you, I would go in and erase this line and that line. These curved ones are now our waistline. And again, that's preliminary. We're going to, later go in and fold our dart and we'll finalize that shape. I want you to come back up here to your shoulder line. I'm gonna use my handy dandy paper trick, where I'm gonna cut a piece of paper that has like a straight edge on it, line it up with F and H. What I wanna do is I wanna find the middle, right in the middle of F to H, right in the middle of our shoulder line. So I'm gonna use paper, give yourself a little tick mark right at F and H. Fold the paper in half, bring those two marks together, and crease right in the middle. Then when you realign it with your shoulder line, that crease will be right in the middle. Of course, you can go and measure and whatnot, but this is always a handy way to do it, okay? So I got a little tick mark right in the middle of my shoulder line. And again, remember, you're not going to G, you're going all the way out here to H, all right? So this middle line, we're gonna label it P. And what I want you to do is I want you to line your ruler up with P and O. So get your ruler in alignment with P and O. And then from P, I want you to draw a 1, 2, 3-inch line in the direction of O and give yourself a little cross mark at 3 inches from P. This is the beginnings of our shoulder dart. This is the central line, kind of the fold line of our shoulder dart. So we're gonna have to develop our dart legs on either side of that. This dart point, we're gonna label it Q. Now both of these darts are pointing to an apex on the back of our body, which is our shoulder blade. Now our shoulder blade, it's a bit different than like the bust apex on the front. The bust apex on the front is very centralized volume, like it's a lot of protrusion right in one spot. The shoulder blade is a little bit more flattened and a little bit more broad and kind of spread out. So these darts on the back are fine the way they are drafted. We do not need to back the dart points off like we do on our bust apex, okay? So just remember that when you're using this back sloper to develop like a design or using it to manipulate darts, you do not have to back the dart points off of the back bodice, like any sort of apex, but we do need to do that on the front bodice, on the bust apex. All right, from P, we are going to measure towards F 1/4 inch and label it R. So R is gonna be one of our dart legs. What we're gonna do is get our ruler in alignment with Q and get our ruler in alignment with R as well. We're gonna draw a dart leg from Q 1/8 of an inch past R. So go to Q through R and go 1/8 of an inch past it, okay? We are going to connect this over to F. This lower little line right here, you can erase that if you want. All right, so now on this side of P towards us, we're going to measure 1/4 inch towards us from P. What we want to do is we're going to draw from Q through this, our other dart leg, but we want this dart leg to match our first one. So go and measure Q to R, measure that dart leg. So for this dart leg, Q to R, I'm getting about 3 3/16, 3 1/4. You should be getting something in that realm. Whatever your measurement is, I want you to swivel your ruler over here. From Q to R, draw a dart leg that is the exact same measurement. Okay, so again, this dart leg from Q to R should match this dart leg over here. Now you are going to connect the end of this dart leg over to H. And you can erase this lower line right here. Now what we need to do is go up here along the center back. Our drafting instructions are telling us that they want us to find the 1/4 mark from D to B. So essentially what you need to do is measure D to B, divide that into quarters, and measure down from D that much, and give yourself a cross mark. Feel free to use the paper trick. You can cut another strip of paper, fold it in half, and then fold it in half again. And the first crease line down from D is going to be your mark. Or I'm just gonna tell you what I got. When I measure this, I get 16 3/4, which is exactly what our measurement we had from B to D. So when I divide that into quarters, I get 4 3/16. So you can just measure down 4 3/16 from D. give yourself a cross mark and label it S. Now again at S, we want to square a line out from center back, and we want to square a line out 7¼ inches. So I squared a line out 7¼ inches. I'm gonna label this T. And I want you to give yourself a guideline that goes up and down from T that's squared off with this. It really only needs to be like 4 inches long. All right, now is time for us to do our armhole, develop our armhole curve, our neckline curve, and then we're done with our back draft. That was like so easy. What we want to do is get out our French curve. Before I do that, I want down here at N, this is our side seam. So when we connect our front bodice and our back bodice at this side seam, I kind of want to do what I can to make sure that our curve is going to blend well. And one way you can do that is to develop just the tiniest bit of a 90-degree corner right here at the top of the side seam. So the way I'm going to do that is line up one of my smaller lines on my ruler with our side seam here. And I am just going to give myself the littlest bit of a line that's squared off from it. You see that? So we have just maybe a ½ inch of a squared off line right there. Doesn't have to be that much even. I'm also going to do the same thing here at H, where I line one of these smaller lines on my ruler up with my shoulder line. And then at H, I kind of square a line down just a bit of a 90-degree angle. All right, here we go. I tried to use whiteout a bit to kind of clean this up, but hopefully if you use pencil, you can just erase what you don't need, okay? You definitely want this shoulder line coming from your dart leg over to H, and then square a line down from H, just a little ways, like ½ inch or less. Now is the time for your French curve. What you're gonna do with your French curve is you're ultimately connecting H to N. But along that curve, you want the curve to graze somewhere along this guideline coming up and down from T. It does not have to hit right at this intersection. It just needs to graze somewhere along that line. So I'm going to take my French curve and I'm just going to start sliding it in, play around with it, you know, twist it around, move it up and down, in and out, until this straighter edge up here is hitting at H. This bottom curve is hitting at N, and then this edge of it is grazing ever so slightly, that guideline coming down at T. Once you've played around with it and you're happy with it, hold it in place and mark your curve. Again, you don't have to hit here at the end of your 90-degree angle. I just need the tiniest amount of a 90-degree corner right here, and that'll just, you know, ensure that we have a smoother blend on our curves. Lovely, I like that. I think that is beautiful. Okay, now for our neckline curve. I want you to bring your French curve up here and get the straighter edge over here by your center back, and the more curvy side is going to hit near F. Now before you start, I want you to take your clear gridded ruler, sort of create a diagonal line right here at the intersection coming down from F and coming out from D. Along that diagonal line, I want you to measure 3/8 of an inch and give yourself a tick mark, okay? So diagonal line, 3/8 of an inch coming out from there. Now, when you're gonna create your neckline by connecting F, hitting somewhere near this tick mark you gave yourself, and it's gonna glide down here into D. So you'll probably notice that once you slide your curve up here and you got it touching F, kind of going near that cross mark you gave yourself, and right here where it's grazing this D line, you'll notice that it's a few inches out from center back. That is totally okay. And actually what we want to make sure of is that here at D, we have a 90-degree angle, okay? So when you're happy with your curve hitting F, hitting that cross mark and coming down here and touching D, I want you to draw your curve in. Do not follow your curve back up after it touches the D line. Once it touches the D line, just let it go smoothly into D. So we have very much quite a long ways of a 90-degree angle right here, okay? So hopefully you got that drawn in. Look at us, we're done with our back draft. So you should have done your front draft and your back draft, and now you're ready to go to the finalizing bodice drafts video. That's where we're gonna put this all together and make them make sense to one another.